Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome as always to our coffee times. You guys know that I love to watch movies that combine horror with mental health, and I have decided to put together a list of 15 movies that I enjoy that are combining exactly that, the genre of horror with the theme of mental illness being integrated in these 15 movies.
It's coffee time!
Honestly, the mental illness, mental health has been depicted in horror in movies for the longest time, even if we don't feel like it has been, because it is in the recent years that we've been really seeing these being portrayed properly, or a little bit more into detail, a little bit more accurate. But we can track this back to the 1920s with the German expressionist film The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari's, and we can find it in so many classics as well. We also have Psycho, that depicts somebody with dissociative personality disorder, and sadly in this movie that is not being explored in depth, but we can already see how this character is living with this illness, even though, like I said, it was not really explored or explained into much detail. I feel like it is, like I said, in the recent years that we've seen really a lot of character exploration, a little bit more of kind of developing the character, taking into consideration that mental illness and really portraying it a little bit more faithful to what it would be, you know, to live with that illness. We're going to go now to the list of 15 movies. They are in no particular order. So before we jump into those, if you love horror, if you love movies and collectibles, please consider subscribing to the channel before you leave, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more coffee times. The first movie that we're going to talk about is the one that actually inspired this video, and that is a movie that I have recently watched and has become one of my favorites of the ones that I have watched in 2021, and that is Saint Maud, that officially was released in 2019. And this is a British psychological horror movie, and it is the directorial debut of Rose Glass. And we follow the story of Maud. She is a nurse that is struggling with herself and discovers religion. And while she is a stay-in nurse to take care of a dancer that is suffering from cancer, she decides that she's going to save her. In the journey of Maud trying to save this woman's soul, she's going to struggle with her own sanity and mental health, and we are going to see it deteriorate as the movie goes. And I absolutely love this movie because it also is kind of a depiction of religion in a complete different scenario than I'm used to in horror movies, and it shows religion as a double-edged sword. So it's not like pro or contra, it's just showing you the different effects of religion if you take it from, you know, a normal thing that you love to obsession. The next one is another one of my absolute favorites, and another directorial debut, in this case by Jennifer Kent. We have The Babadook from 2014. The Babadook focuses on a widow, Amelia Vanek, and her 6-year-old son Sam. After her late husband's demise, Amelia has to look after her son, who develops an obsession with an imaginary entity in a top hat. Even though the story might seem at first glance that it's about the kid and this imaginary friend creature, the Babadook, that he can see, it is actually about Amelia's depression and about her survival's guilt, and it is all told in such an intelligent way that this was also definitely one of my favorite movies that year, and another one that I would rewatch anytime because I thought the portrayal of struggle and mental health was amazing. I love that not only do we see mental health portrayed as something that it is in her mind, but also something that it's affecting her body physically. The next movie is another one of those greatest films that you have to see, and that is Black Swan from 2010. Although it is fashioned as a psychological horror film, many argue that the film is a metaphor for an artist's obsession with their art and the lengths they're going to go to achieve perfection. In this movie, we follow Nina, portrayed by Natalie Portman, that is a ballet dancer, and she gets a really important role, and we see how this is consuming her and it's taking her in a down spiral that is going to affect not only herself but also her art. And it is a very, very dark film, and yeah, another one that in my opinion really did a good job when it comes to portray mental health. Our next movie is one of my absolute favorites as well, and even though I have heard people saying that the portrayal of mental health in this movie is not done in a positive way, I still really enjoy this film, and that is Split from 2016. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which focused on a man living with dissociative identity disorder who abducts 3 girls. The film is exploring our main character that is living with so many different personalities. I think he has a total of 27 personalities, and when they come, they basically take over of his body and his mind, and he turns into that person. I absolutely love this movie, and James McAvoy in this movie was just amazing. I mean, this man deserved an Oscar for this movie, and it is another one that I have rewatched a couple of times and I just cannot get tired of. Also to mention here, the same director did The Visit in 2015. This is one that I didn't personally like, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed, and it has been said though that this movie is one of the worst when it comes to depicting mental health, specifically schizophrenia. Like I said, I watched it once. I actually unhauled it because I'm never gonna rewatch it. It was just not for me, but I know a lot of people out there love it. Our next movie on this list is one that just came out last year, and I haven't heard many people talking about it, and I think it deserves a little bit more of love, and that is The Ascent. After a series of disturbing supernatural events in his home, Joel, a young single father, comes to suspect that his young son may be possessed. He then asks a priest to save him despite the huge risks. This is a paranormal horror story, and we follow this father that he himself struggles with schizophrenia, and he starts to wonder if his son is either suffering the same schizophrenia that he has, or if he is being possessed by some evil entity. I love that this movie is breaking a lot of cliches. We don't have the single mother struggling with their kid that we always see in horror movies. We have a single father that is also suffering from mental health issues, and he is left alone caring for his son. Something's wrong with his son, and we see him suffering through all of this and struggling with his mental health, and I really enjoyed this movie because of all of that. Another one from last year that I have already watched twice, it is Relic, an Australian horror drama film directed by Natalie Erica James in her directorial debut. And it follows the generation of 3 women when Edna, the grandmother, goes missing. Her daughter and granddaughter decide to go and see what happened to her, see if they can find her. Edna eventually returns home, but the daughter soon realizes that something is wrong with her. There are post-its all over the house to remind her of things that she has to do or where things are, and they realize that the mother is suffering with dementia and she might be sicker than they wanted to believe. This really dark, obscure portrayal of dementia was so well done, and it was full of metaphors, and that ending for me, it was a 10 out of 10. And we have yet another from last year. There were a lot of mental health movies that came out last year, and this one was also a great movie that I would recommend anybody to check, and that is The Dark and the Wicked. Plagued by waking nightmares, 2 siblings suspect that something evil is taking over their family at an isolated farmhouse. 2 siblings return to their home in Texas because their dad is very, very ill. He even has a nurse that takes care of him. But when we get there, they realize that it's not just their dad that is really sick. Something seems to be off with their mom. She starts to exhibit really weird behavior, and things will escalate quickly. This movie was really intelligent. It was very slow paced though, and I absolutely loved the portrayal here as well of mental health and how a person can deteriorate. And this is one that might not be for everybody. I've heard really mixed reviews, either you love it or hate it, but I definitely think that it was a great movie. We're going a little bit back on time to check out another one of my favorites, and that is The Taking of Deborah Logan. an American found footage supernatural horror film. It is the feature film directorial debut of Adam Robight. Set in Virginia, it tells the story of a documentary crew making a film about Alzheimer's patients who uncover something sinister while documented a woman that is suffering this disease. Deborah and her daughter Sarah let into their homes this news crew that is kind of documenting how a person living with Alzheimer's daily life is, their struggles, and how this mental illness is deteriorating and how it affects the patient and the daughter and the family living with them. This movie was just so unsettling, and the images that you get to see are just so creepy. There is specifically one of the scenes towards the end in a cave. It's a scene you're never gonna forget, you're never gonna get out of your mind, and this movie was just amazing. I absolutely loved it, and it's one of my favorites when it comes to found footage. We are now going even more back in time to 1990 because we have Jacob's Ladder, which is actually a film that deals with PTSD. An American psychological horror film that follows a worker haunted by flashbacks to his earlier marriage, his torturous days of duty during the Vietnam War, and his now dead son. As a result, from the time that he served in Vietnam, this poor man has vivid images, hallucinations, and nightmares that take him back. And this movie was just so good, and a movie that a lot of people still enjoy to watch right now. There is a remake from 2019 that I have not watched because I don't think I want to. I don't know if you've already watched it. Let me know down below if it's any good, but I just absolutely love the way that this movie dealt with a character that is really struggling with PTSD after the war. Our next movie is an independent psychological horror film that was pretty good, and that is They Look Like People. Shot, edited, written, produced, and directed by Perry Blackshear, it was his feature film directorial debut. Suspecting that people around him are turning into evil creatures, a troubled man questions whether to protect his only friend from an impending war or from himself. Schizophrenia is one of those mental illness that does come around often, combined with horror because of the hallucinations, the visions, the voices that they hear. It's kind of something that helps horror to be unsettling. So schizophrenia can actually lead people to depression and even sometimes to suicide. And what I loved about this movie is that they gave us a portrayal of the sickness that was grounded and heartbreaking. So if you have not checked this movie out yet, I think you should. Jumping now to another one of my favorites, we have American Psycho from 2000. An American black comedy slasher film co-written and directed by Mary Herron, based on Bret Easton Ellis' 1991 novel of the same name. In this film, we get to explore the profile of a psychopath. We follow Patrick Bateman. We are in New York in the 80s, and he apparently seems like this normal guy. He's an investment banker, but he also has a secret second life, and that is that he is a serial killer preying on prostitutes. I remember watching this movie when it came out in the cinema, and I was not that old, and I remember it really had an impact on me, and since then it has been following me. I've always loved it so much, and it has also a great cast. The next movie that I would like to talk to you guys about is Lights Out. An American supernatural horror film directed by David Sandberg in his directorial debut. In the film, a young woman must confront her childhood fears to protect her brother from a vengeful supernatural entity holding a mysterious attachment to their mother. The movie does focus on a mother that is suffering depression. It has been receiving some critique because here we have mental illness being portrayed kind of as a weakness, which is something that I don't always love to see either, because mental illness should not be portrayed as something that is making you weaker or less than. However, as a horror movie, it did work really well. I did find myself enjoying the film, so I decided to add it to this list in case that you still have not checked it out. Now the next movie is not particularly horror, but I just could not, stop myself from putting it in this list because of how weird and interesting this was, and that is Melancholia, a science fiction drama art film written and directed by Lars von Trier. Von Trier's initial inspiration for the film came from a depressive episode he suffered. The film's story revolves around two sisters, one of whom is preparing to marry just before a rock planet is about to collide with Earth. Even though this movie is not officially horror, it does give us a really horrifying portrayal of somebody that is dealing with depression, and this whole movie is weird, okay? You know the director, you know what kind of movies he makes, so in case you have not checked it out, you have to keep that in mind. However, the intensity of the character exploration, how we really got to explore their minds, their thoughts, and the visuals are also stunning. This is a story about a woman that's getting married, so it's supposed to be like the happiest day of her life, but she is the complete opposite of happy. She's just miserable. And now we're gonna talk about a movie that I think by now everybody has watched, but I had to include it in this list, and that is Hereditary. This is the story of a family haunted by a mysterious presence after the death of their grandmother. When the matriarch of the Graham family passes away, her daughter and grandchildren begin to unravel cryptic and increasingly terrifying secrets about their ancestry. This was Ari Aster's directorial debut. I have realized how many directorial debuts I have included in this list, and this movie explores grief and loss and how sometimes when you're grieving, things spiral a little bit out of control in your life, how that can lead to a deeper depression. Apart from an amazing mental health portrayal, this movie has such a great exploration of character. We see the other members of the family kind of reacting to Annie and her paranoias and her, decline when it comes to mental health, and we see how the other characters are kind of pushing her away. And to finish, I have left here for the last recommendation a movie that maybe not everybody knows about. The director is really well known, but since it is an older film, maybe you don't know about it, so this is maybe a hidden gem for you, and that is Repulsion from 1965, a British psychological horror film directed by Roman Polanski. Carol, a manicurist who suffers from an unusual fear of men, is left alone in the apartment by her sister. Soon Carol sinks into madness, having visions of rape and violence. There have been a lot of different interpretations of this film and what these visions that our main character has and these nightmares could mean. We don't really get an explanation if the main character had in her childhood any sort of abuse or rape, but that might be an explanation for her condition. Another thing could be the impossibility of accepting her own body and her own sexuality. And another thing could be that she has a fear of intimacy. There is a lot of different interpretations, but this was one of those first movies that kind of addressed repulsion and disgust of something as a mental kind of decline of a character, and it is a great character exploration. I also have, of course, a couple of honorable mentions. We have Jack Torrance from The Shining, whose mental health also starts a decline when he goes to stay at the Overlook Hotel. We of course also have Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. I left these movies out because I believe everybody has seen them 1,000 times, so I didn't feel like I had to mention them. Also in Cube we have a character that suffers from autism, and that it was something that was really cool to see in the film. I would like to say that horror movies still have a long way to go in order to really give us a great portrayal of mental health, but we are definitely making progress. At least we're trying now to make movies that are being more faithful to these mental health issues, that are trying to explore it from the character's point of view, to try to make us understand the struggles that they have to go through, the way their mind works. Cinema definitely has the possibility of, you know, create this empathy, to create this understanding for people that are not in contact with these mental health issues every day, to let us peek a little bit into what it actually means to be struggling with one of these diseases. I really hope that one of the things that we're going to see in the future is to finally get, you know, rid of all of those stigmas and actually just sit down and try to understand, try to, you know, be open and just do our own research as well, to try to understand a lot better what people that deal with mental health actually go through. Alright, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below your thoughts on mental health combined with horror in the film industry. Let's talk about it in the comments. Also, let me know if you know of other movies that I should check out that have the theme of mental illness in horror. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I really appreciate your support. Please give the video a big thumbs up, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!